What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video with some big news went down in the New York Giants world. We're going to get into Saquon Barkley, what the contract is going to be, and what it means for his future with the New York Giants. I also want to touch on some of the things that came out today around the draft world, being that the draft is only a day away. And trust me, we're going to have a lot of draft coverage up over the next 3 days. I obviously have the Knicks game tonight against Chicago. I am going to go a little bit earlier, being that I know a lot of you guys are going to want to talk about the draft. A lot of you guys are going to want to talk about Saquon Barkley. When the game is on, I'm focusing on the Knicks versus the Bulls. I'll try to answer some questions throughout the stream, but I'm going to go live. I usually go at 7:25 for a 7:30 game. I'm going to go live at like 6:50 so we get some opportunity to talk some football along with any questions you guys may have about the New York Knicks game. But in this video, we're going to talk about first the news that came out with Barkley. Then we're going to dive into the news about Teddy Bridgewater on his way to the Denver Broncos. Now, one thing I'll say before I dive into my opinion on Bridgewater and how it may affect the New York Giants draft pick, Schefter came out and said that doesn't necessarily mean that the Broncos are out of the market for a quarterback. If I had to guess, I would say they probably are. But does that mean that Carolina may take a quarterback? We're going to have to wait and see. Of course, they acquired Sam Darnold. But if you ask me right now where my head is at, I would say more than likely no. I would say that those two teams probably will not be taking a quarterback. That does not mean that 4 or even 5 quarterbacks may not go in the first 10 picks. Of course, you still have teams like the Patriots. You still have teams like Washington that could trade up. And maybe a team like Denver or Carolina could very well take a quarterback. But I'm going to give my final thoughts on my final mock draft tomorrow during the live stream. And I think the first 4 picks are pretty cut and dry. I think it's 3 quarterbacks at the top. And unless Atlanta trades down, which at this point I doubt they do, I think Kyle Pitts will be that 4th overall selection. But we're going to jump into the news about Saquon Barkley. Barkley, of course, entering his 4th year with the New York Giants, coming off a very bad injury last year in which he tore his ACL rather, not his Achilles. Coming back from the injury, and he's trying to get back into playing shape. Well, news came out earlier today, I didn't pull up that tweet, that Barkley is well on pace to be able to start the season 100% for the New York Giants. Of course, Dave Gettleman came out earlier, about a month ago, and he said that he would not commit to the 5th-year option for Barkley until they got medical approval. Well, that appears to be the case. Barkley appears to be in great shape, and about 5 or 6 days before the deadline, the New York Giants put pen to paper, and Barkley will be signing that 5th-year option with the New York Giants. I'm going to get into why this is absolutely a no-brainer for the Giants and why it may not necessarily mean that Barkley's going to be here long term. But let's jump into what Schefter had to say. The Giants picked up the 5th-year option on the contract of running back Saquon Barkley per source. And this year, Barkley's due to make about $10 million. But why it makes absolutely no sense not to sign it, even if you were worried that he may be banged up at the start of the year, it's less to keep him on the 5th year than it was to pay him in the 4th. It's only going to be about $7.2 million if I remember correctly. Now, the thing I'm going to say about that, in the end, I don't think Barkley is going to play on that $7.2 million if I had to guess. My guess would be either A, the New York Giants are going to extend him at the end of this season. If Barkley goes out there and has a Christian McCaffrey-like season from 2 years ago and he lights the world on fire, he's going to earn his extension, and I think the New York Giants will pay him appropriately. If you look at running backs over the course of history, usually by the end of their 3rd year, which would have been this past year for Barkley, they look to get their extension. The main reason being, well, obviously, it's a position that you break down early and often. Barkley doesn't have a leg to stand on, both literally and figuratively, after the injury last year. So he has to go out there and he has to prove that he's the guy and regain that form that we saw early in his career, specifically in his rookie season with the New York Giants. And if he does that, I absolutely believe that the New York Giants will extend Barkley by season's end, in between seasons. I have to think that. I don't think Barkley would want to play on that 5th-year option. I think that they'd want to get a deal done. Now, if Barkley gets hurt again, or if Barkley struggles, expect the New York Giants to either A, have him play on the 5th-year option, because at that point, Barkley doesn't have much negotiating power, or B, potentially look to trade him. Now, even if he plays good, he may not necessarily get that extension. The Giants may decide that he may not be the best long-term answer, being that they'd have to commit $15 or $16 million a year. And that's something we're going to have to cross when it gets to us at the end of the year. By giving him this 5th-year option, I think it gives the New York Giants a little bit more bargaining power when it comes to the trade market, being that teams know that they don't have to immediately sign him. They could have him under a cost-effective contract for a year. So if they elected to go that route, In the end, if the Giants have a good year, I fully expect Barkley to sign a second contract with the New York Giants. Because if the Giants have a good year, Dave Gettleman is going to stay on as the general manager more than likely. Gettleman was the guy that spent the second overall pick on Saquon Barkley. He's the guy that said he was touched by the hand of God. So the ball is in Barkley's court. The ball is in the offensive line's court. If Barkley goes out there and dominates this year, I expect him to be a New York Giant for at least another 3 or 4 years after this year. It's a big year for Barkley. It's a big year for Jones. And it's a big year for Jason Garrett. Now, like I said, I want to touch a little bit more on the draft. By Bridgewater going to Denver, does that mean they won't go quarterback? I don't know, right? They still have Drew Lock, but now they traded for Bridgewater. They only gave up a 6th-round pick to do it, though, and Bridgewater really doesn't have much, he's making a decent amount of money this year, but I think he'd be able to cut him and take no dead cap at the following year. So does that preclude them from not drafting a quarterback at number 9 overall if they love one? Not necessarily, but it would lead me to believe that they're probably not leaning that route. That doesn't mean that Carolina is. Carolina, of course, traded for Sam Darnold, and they gave up a decent price tag to do it. I would think they will not be going quarterback as well, but I wouldn't be shocked if they're in love with Justin Fields or Trey Lance. But the question I would have, if you're Denver and you really like one of these quarterbacks, why would you have traded for Teddy Bridgewater to have a stopgap quarterback? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me unless you want him to mentor the guy you're drafting, but you still have Drew Lock on that roster. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. There's a lot of question marks, but like I said at the top of the video, for all the Giants fans that are hoping and praying that 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks go in the first 10 picks, because obviously it's beneficial to us. The more quarterbacks to go in the top 10, the better, because other players leak down to us. Even if that doesn't happen, even if only 3 quarterbacks drop, go in the top 10 picks, in a way, if you want to look at it from a positive standpoint, it could be good for the Giants, because that means either Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Mac Jones, or 2 of those guys would still be on the board when the New York Giants are up at number 11, meaning that we'd have a lot of bargaining power if we were looking to trade down. We've heard a lot of rumors today about Kwity Paye. All of a sudden, he's starting to get a lot of traction. He's moved up in terms of the odds to be drafted. I think he's 2nd behind Devontae Smith, if I'm not mistaken right now. At least that's what I saw on Twitter. I think on the DraftKings app, he's moved all the way up from like plus 1,600 to plus 400. Does that mean that's what's going to happen? No. I think it was Bobby Skinner actually posted it on Twitter last year. At this point, the day before the draft, Andrew Thomas was like plus 700. Simmons was the favorite, I believe. And the day of the draft, more rumors came out and Thomas moved up. These odds are going to change a lot as we approach to the draft. And the Giants don't know who's going to be on the clock when they pick. I'm going to stick with what I've thought all along. And I think the New York Giants, in the end, will end up going with either Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle if they're there at 11. Of course, there's no way I can know that will be the case. If they're not, well, we'll have to wait and see. They could trade down. They could go with a guy like Kwity Paye, or they could very well try to get potentially a guy like Micah Parsons or an offensive lineman. We don't know yet. And right now, we're not used to this as Giants fans picking number 11. Usually, we're picking earlier in the draft. But we're going to get our answers tomorrow. I promise you that. Around 9 o'clock, you're going to know who will be in Big Blue going into the 2021 season. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.